Usually, especially in a church, you kind of hope that you love the people.
Yep.
More than what you're trying to do to them. Right?
Yeah, right. Yep.
They're not you're not trying to force a project on them, but
Right. Yep.
you love them and respect them where they're at.
Yep. Okay. Then it first started with find partners. It talked about keeping the opposition close. And then it had 3 other pieces of advice about accepting responsibility for your piece of the mess. When you do social innovation, you create mess because it's change, right? Because you're leading people from one place to another, you're doing something different, it creates mess. If, let's say in Sunday school, if this past year, right, we've had this thing with Children's Church. Been a wonderful innovation, right? But my guess is, and I don't know, that there's probably 1 or 2 Sunday school teachers who are like, well, that didn't go exactly the way I wanted it to go, right? So we created mess for them, right? And as leaders, we want to acknowledge that it does create mess, and we want to be involved in that mess, right? And you can think of any other ministry where you make an innovation and you create mess, and you got to accept responsibility for that, right? Also acknowledge their loss. When you go through an innovation, people are losing something that they value, and you've got to acknowledge that. And you can't acknowledge their loss without being in relationship. So again, thinking politically is not about, I think Tammy's word was schmoozing, right? It's not just about schmoozing, but it's about genuinely caring about their loss, right? And communicating that. Then it's also about modeling the behavior, right, of that social innovation. Let's say if you're a leader and you've been involved in, let's say, Facebook, you're going to use Facebook. If you're a leader and you're doing such and such a thing with your ministry, you're going to also do that thing yourself. If you're promoting to people that they should be in small groups, then you should be in a small group yourself. If you're urging people to read Scripture, you should be reading Scripture yourself. All of these innovations should be things that you're embodying, right? Because people are not only listening to what you're saying, they're watching what you're doing. The very last thing in the chapter was accept casualties. Remember when George W. Started bombing Iraq, and there were a bunch of civilians that were killed, and he said, oh, that's collateral damage. Anybody remember that? Right? And just how offensive that was. When I started reading Accept Casualties, I was feeling some of that same offensiveness, right? Because it feels wrong to accept the fact that there would be casualties. Anybody else have that when they did the reading, that part of thinking politically was accepting casualties? Anybody else have that?
I did appreciate the way it was written up in here.
Yeah.
For example, as I read it, it was more about that person deciding they could not get on board.
Yeah.
After most people have decided that they are on board and they're committing to it, and just grieving and accepting that be the case. So I could hear that better than I could hear the title.
Yeah, the title sounds pretty cold. Right. Did Jesus accept casualties? Any examples of Jesus accepting casualties?
Rich man walking away.
The rich man walking away, right. What could Jesus have done right there if he didn't accept casualties? Run after him, chase him down. Right? Sometimes people will make up their mind, and you can't change it, that they're not adapting this social innovation. Right? And that's why we move through social innovations deliberately and in communication with all, because we want to minimize, because later iteration of Rogers has not only the first end being 2.5% innovators and 13.5% early adopters, but also divides the laggards into laggards 13.5% and never adopters down to 2.5%. Right? That there are going to be people that they're just not going to go. For whatever reason, maybe they've said sometime really loudly, I'm not doing this, and even if they change their mind, they can't now, or whatever it is. There may be some reason they're just not going along with that innovation, right? I want us to spend the last 10 minutes, just kind of going through the questions that are there on thinking politically. It's now 9:34. We'll do that until 9:45, and then I'll invite you to transition into a time of prayer. So there's just 4 questions there, and as we've still got this up on the screen, you can think about those different categories, and you can think through some of the advice given about finding partners and keeping opposition close, and just talk with each other about specifics and where this is real for you in your ministry.